Shrink Different with Dr. Wolf, the change agent.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Steve Wolf joining you again for shrinkdifferentradio.com. This talk and presentation is archived. We have the history. We've been doing it for a couple of months. I'm telling Mr. J, I feel like I'm finding my voice, and I really enjoy sharing my work here with you all and my points of view. So we have a guest here today, Mr. Michael Banyard, who has known of me and my work. We've known each other now probably how long, Michael? 10 years?
It's been a while, about 10 years or a little bit longer than that.
And Michael had a question that he wanted to address here. He brought it up on Facebook, and I responded. And I thought that this would be a great theme for the show today. So, Michael, why don't you talk about your question?
Okay, I sure will. My question was, why do we self-sabotage? What makes us do this? That was my question to you, Dr. Wolf. Why do we self-sabotage?
And now, what were some of the answers you got on Facebook? What were some of the reasons that people had their understanding of self-sabotage?
Okay, one of the people that responded was he intentionally makes mistakes that he knows going to come out with a negative outcome because he's tried to do the right thing and he didn't get the results that he wanted, so he gave up on trying. Other views were we need to man up and stop playing the victim. So there's issues with that, covering that area that, some people we just need to man up and stop playing the victim. There was a lot of different forms of reaching out, really, from people that wanted to find an answer. What really caught my attention was that we had more comments than we had likes, and usually just the opposite on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. Now, I gave you a little bit. I said, no, for me, my shrink different approach is I see it from a psychological point of view, and to give the answer is to go back in terms of understanding the development of personality. So if you want, that's my level of answer here. A couple of times I've told the King Arthur story, and the idea that there is a rightful king consciousness within all of us, and the challenge is to hear the voice, that voice of that dimension of our identity as human beings. And so
nobody gets out of childhood unscathed. This is normal development. Now, this personality construct that we developed is a protector. It protects us at a very early age, so we don't have to feel the vulnerability. It doesn't hurt so much. You figure out different ways of doing it. Any behavior pattern that you can think of can be used as a protector in that way. So it could be maybe whatever it is that caused you to give up. Whatever it was that caused you to be really nice, and do the best you could, but then that didn't work either, and you gave up. Maybe it taught you to be a bully. Maybe you thought you'd be a great athlete. Maybe you would be just the helper in the family, going into the 12-step idea of families involved with alcoholism. Now, the protector saves us when we're kids. We learn how to protect ourselves from being emotionally hurt. Maybe you get distant. You just shut down and get distant. Okay, so you protected yourselves. You developed this part of your personality. Now, fast forward 2, 3, 4, 5 decades later. That protector has now become a saboteur. Mm-hmm. That personality construction, the very thing that used to save us when we were young, is now undermining us as we are older. Now, most often I've seen people become aware of the saboteur and really want to deal with it in the context of relationships. It's how we affect others in our relationships, how we communicate to others, how we receive impressions, how we learn about it. These are the protector-saboteur situations where the people I see, for instance, as a therapist, they will want to figure out, what am I doing that sabotages me in my relationships? Okay. Now, there's other degrees of self-sabotage, for instance. So there's addiction. Mm-hmm. You can sabotage because the reason that you return to your addiction, going back to the Knights of the Round Table, is there's a character at your table who says to you, hey, let's go get high.
Yeah.
That's what that character says. And, or, you know, the hell with what. You're a character at your table, very seductive, that you think is the voice of a friend. It's a construction. This character learned that if he can get his addiction, he can relieve his own pain. Or she. It's a way of pain. And so, it's going to remind you how cool it was in that moment. Now, when I work with people dealing with addiction, once you've identified yourself as an addict, I say, there is no such thing as just getting high. That's a lie. You don't just get high. What it is do I want to go back into my addiction or not? That's the real question. It's not do you want to get high. Of course you want to get high. Everybody wants to get high on something. But you can't do that. If you've been down that road before, and you understand what happens to you, and that you can't just do one line of this or a glass of that or whatever, then when you say, I just want to get high one time, that's the character that is seducing you, that's telling you lies in your own head. Okay. Now, challenge is to recognize what's the voice of the king and what's the voice of a character. Once you recognize the voice of the character, you're much less likely to let it dominate your actions and take over the throne. And that's where the 12-step program shines. Because once you begin to have thoughts or ideas or feelings about using it, you know it's time to call your sponsor. You see it coming. Okay. You identify already that you're being invaded, and you have a support system to help keep you focused on your, on your goal. But the self-sabotage in that case is this feeling of wanting to eliminate the pain somehow, I think. Okay. Now, there's many explanations.
Okay, can I ask you this, Dr. Wolf? Okay, feel like he's relating to relationships. Is this similar to what you're talking about? How I could want to I could be in a relationship, going forward a relationship, growing in a relationship, and then I get this feeling of, wait a minute, this is all that I've been looking for. It's got to be too good to be true. So then we start doing things that would act out sabotage because she can't be this trustworthy. She got to be cheating. This got to be happening. He can't be all this. Something's got to be. We'll start looking for what's wrong. Is that similar to what you were talking about earlier?
Well, what I would say to you is, okay, that's the voice. But what is your concern? What if it is too good to be true?
Then I think it could become some type of fear, because I think it goes back to, do I feel worthy of something so special? I think it goes back to how we value ourselves too. What would you say about that? If I don't value myself enough to have something too good to be true, then I reject it.
Well, here's what I would say. That I think you said the magic word. There's fear underneath.
Yeah.
The fear is that maybe she'll dump me. Or maybe I'll have to deal with my feelings of unworthiness that I picked up back in the loony bin.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know if I can deal with all this. I don't know if I can be vulnerable again. I'm not going to be vulnerable. Screw that. Too much pain. So I'm not going to do it. So this character comes in and he throws me all this bullshit about myself. And I go, okay, that's real. I believe all that. And what you've done is you've avoided the fear of finding out whether you can actually deal with being vulnerable or not. Okay. That's what I would say. Part of the challenge.
So we come back to fear again. We come back to the fear being so effective in our life and redirecting our life unless we pay attention to it.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding. Can you slow it down a little bit?
Okay, what I was saying is that, again, we return to the effect that fear plays in our life in a different area of our life, but still just as detrimental.
Are you asking me that question?
Yeah, I'm kind of like asking a question and making a statement, seeing what you think about that, because we know that fear, the connection between fear and anger, and now fear and self-sabotage, and it's like it just continues to flow in so many different areas in our life. What do you think about that?
Okay, I think, again, this goes back to, and I haven't talked about this on the show yet, this goes back to what's the distinction between a real and an imagined emotion. This program is about emotional intelligence. So I say, okay, there's a couple of, now I would encourage, I'd encourage you people to go to Taming Your Anger and buy the Building Blocks for Emotional Intelligence workbook. There's a digital copy. It's like $10 or something like that. You get all of these things there. And so emotional intelligence includes understanding emotions. Now, we've talked about you have an emotional brain, that's primitive, you have a thinking brain, and so the Taming Your Anger program is to help your thinking brain take over when your emotional brain is about to hijack you and get you to do stuff you regret. So we understand that an emotion is an impulse produced by your amygdala, your emotional brain. It's an impulse, like your heartbeat is an impulse by your reptile brain or your lizard brain. It's an impulse. Emotion is an impulse. Now, a real emotion, as far as I'm concerned, is an emotion. You see, your emotions inform you. Our emotions have been telling us if we're safe or unsafe ever since it was time to leave the first cave we were in. These are old. They inform us. They inform us before the thinking brain can even know what's going on. The emotional brain can pick stuff up that's going on. It's an instinctual, primitive